12. Reproduction in plants. To produce its kind, it is a characteristic of all living organisms. You have already learned this in class 6. The production of new individuals from their parents is known as reproduction. But how do plants reproduce? There are different modes of reproduction in plants which we shall learn in this chapter. 12.1 Modes of Reproduction. In class 6, you learned about different parts of a flowering plant. Try to list the various parts of a plant and write the functions of each. Most plants have roots, stems, and leaves. These are called the vegetative parts of a plant. After a certain period of growth, most plants bear flowers. You may have seen the mango trees flowering in spring. It is these flowers that give rise to juicy mango fruit we enjoy in summer. We eat the fruits and usually discard the seeds. Seeds germinate and form new plants. So, what is the functions of flowers in plants? Flowers perform the function of reproduction in plants. Flowers are the reproductive parts. There are several ways by which plants produce their offspring. These are categorized into two types, one asexual and two sexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, plants can give rise to new plants without seeds, whereas in sexual reproduction, new plants are obtained from seeds. Paheli thought that new plants always grow from seeds, but she has never seen the seeds of sugarcane, potato, and rose. She wants to know how these plants reproduce. Asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, new plants are obtained without production of seeds. Vegetative propagation. It is a type of asexual reproduction in which new plants are produced from roots, stems, leaves, and buds. Since reproduction is through the vegetative parts of the plant, it is known as vegetative propagation. Activity 12.1. Do this. Cut a branch of rose or champa with a node. The space of branch is termed a cutting. Bury the cutting in the soil. A node is a part of the stem or branch at which a leaf arises. Figure. Water the cutting every day and observe its growth. Observe and record the number of days taken for roots to come out and new leaves to arise. Try the same activity by growing money plant in a jar of water and record your observation. Node bud in the axil. Figure. Stem cutting of rose. You must have seen flower buds developing into flowers. Apart from flower buds, there are buds in the axial point of attachment of the leaf at the node of leaves which develop into shoots. These buds are called vegetative buds. Figure. A bud consists of a short-term round which a mature overlapping leaves are present. Vegetative buds can also give rise to new plants. Activity 12.2. Take a fresh potato. Observe the scars on it with the help of a magnifying glass. You may find buds in them. These scars are also called eyes. Cut the potato into small portions, each with an eye, and bury them in the soil. Water the pieces regularly for a few days and observe their progress. What do you find? Figure. potato plant sprouting from an eye. Likewise, you can also grow ginger, vinegar, or turmeric. Bryophyllum, sprout leaf plant, has buds in the margins of leaves. Figure. If a leaf of this plant falls on a moist figure, ginger with new plants sprouting from it. Soil each bud can give rise to a new plant. Roots of some plants can also give rise to new plants. Sweet potato and dahlia are examples. Plants such as cacti produce new plants when their buds get detached. New plants figure. Leaf of bryophyllum with buds in the margin. From the main plant body, each detached bud can grow into a new plant. Bojo wants to know if there is any advantage of vegetative propagation. Plants produced by vegetative propagation take less time to grow and bear flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from seeds. The new plants are exact copies of the parent plants, as they are produced from a single parent. Later in this chapter, you will learn that plants produced by sexual reproduction have characters of both the parents. Plants produce seeds as a result of sexual reproduction. Budding. You have already learned about the tiny organisms like yeast can be seen only under a microscope. These grow and multiply every few hours if sufficient nutrients are made available to them. Remember that yeast is a single-celled organism. Let us see how they reproduce. Activity 12.3. To be demonstrated by the teacher, take a piece of yeast cake or yeast powder from a bakery or a chemist shop. Take a pinch of yeast and place it in a container with some water. Add a spoonful of sugar and shake to dissolve it. Keep it in the warm part of a room. After an hour, put a drop of this liquid on a glass slide and observe under a microscope. What do you observe? You may see the formation of new yeast cells. Figure. Yeast cell developing bud, new bud, chain of buds. Figure reproduction in yeast by budding. The small bulb-like projection coming out from the yeast cell is called a bud. The bud gradually grows and gets detached from the parent cell and forms a new yeast cell. The new yeast cell grows, matures, and produces more yeast cells. Sometimes another bud arises from the bud forming a chain of buds. If this process continues, a large number of yeast cells are produced in a short time. Fragmentation. You might have seen slimy green patches in ponds or in other stagnant water bodies. These are the algae. When water and nutrients are available, algae grow and multiply rapidly by fragmentation. An alga breaks up into two or more fragments. These fragments of pieces grow into new individuals. Figure. This process continues and they cover a large area in a short period of time. Figure. Fragmentation in Spirogyra and Alga. Spore formation. In chapter 1, you learned that the fungi on a bread piece grow from spores which are present in the air. Repeat activity. Observe the spores in the cotton-like mess on the bread. When spores are released, they keep floating in the sporangium, hypha, spores. Figure. Reproduction through spore formation in fungus. Figure. Reproduction through spore formation in fern. Sorry, spore forming bodies. Air. As they are very light, they can cover long distances. Spores are asexual reproductive bodies. A spore is covered by a hard protective coat to withstand unfavorable conditions such as high temperature and low humidity. So, they can survive for a long time. Under favorable conditions, a spore germinates and develops into a new individual plant such as moss and ferns figure, also reproduce by means of spores. 12.2 Sexual Reproduction. You have learned earlier the structure of a flower. You know that the flowers are the reproductive parts of a plant. Stamens are the male reproductive part and pistil is the female reproductive part figure. Activity: do this. Take a mustard or China rose or petunia flower and separate its reproductive parts. Study the various parts of a stamen and pistil. Flowers which contain either only pistil or only stamens are called unisexual flowers. Flowers which contain both stamens and pistils are called bisexual flowers. Corn, papaya, and cucumber produce unisexual flowers, whereas mustard, rose, and petunia have bisexual flowers. Both anther filament, stamen, B. Pistil, stigma, style, ovary, ovule. Figure reproductive parts. Male and female unisexual flowers may be present in the same plant or in different plants. Could you identify the another and the filament of a stamen? Figure A. Anther contains pollen grains which produce male gametes. A pistil consists of stigma, style, and ovary. Ovary contains one or more ovules. The female gamete or the egg is formed in an ovule. Figure B. In sexual reproduction, a male and a female gamete fuse to form a zygote. Which wants to know how the male gamete in the pollen grain reaches the female gamete present in the ovule. Pollination. Generally, pollen grains have a tough protective coat which prevents them from drying up. Since pollen grains are light, they can be carried by wind or stigma, pollens, anther, stigma. Self-pollination. B. Cross-pollination. Figure pollination in flower. Bojo wants to know why flowers are generally so colorful and fragrant. Is it to attract insects? Water. Insects visit flowers and carry away pollen or their bodies. Some of the pollen lands on the stigma of a flower of the same kind. The transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. If the pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant, it is called self-pollination. When the pollen of a flower lands on the stigma of a flower of a different plant of the same kind, it is called cross-pollination. Figure A and B. Pollen grain germinating, pollen tube, zygote formation, ovum. Figure fertilization, zygote formation. Fertilization. The cell which results after fusion of the gametes is called a zygote. The process of fusion of male and female. A. B. Figure a section of an apple. B. Almond. Gametes to form a zygote is called fertilization. Figure. The zygote develops into an embryo. 12.3 Fruits and seed formation. After fertilization, the ovary grows into a fruit and other parts of the flower follow. The fruit is the ripened ovary. The seeds develop from the ovules. The seed contains an embryo enclosed in a protective seed coat. Some fruits are fleshy and juicy, such as mango and orange. Some fruits are hard like almonds and walnuts. figure A and B. 12.4 Seed Dispersal. In nature, some kind of plants grow at different places. This happens because seeds are dispersed to different places. Sometimes, after a walk through a forest or a field or a park, you may have found seeds or fruits sticking to your clothes. Did you try to observe how these seeds were clinging to your clothes? What do you think will happen if all seeds of a plant were to fall at the same place and grow there? There would be severe competition for sunlight, water, minerals, and space. As a result, the seeds would not grow into healthy plants. Plants benefit by seed dispersal. It prevents competition between the plant and its own seedlings for sunlight, water, and minerals. It also enables the plant to invade new habitats for wider distribution. Seeds and fruits of plants are carried away by wind, water, and animals. Winged seeds such as those of drumstick and maple, figure A and B, light, seed, wing, A, B. Seeds of A, drumstick, and B, maple. Seeds of grass, of hairy seeds of oak, mother, and hairy fruit of sunflower, figure AB, get blown off with the wind to faraway places. Some seeds are dispersed by water. These fruits or seeds usually develop floating availability in the form of spongy or fibrous outer coat, as in coconut. Some seeds are dispersed by animals, especially spiny seeds with hooks which get attached to the bodies of animals and are carried to distant places. Examples are xanthium, figure, and urina. Some seeds are dispersed when the fruits burst with sudden jerks. The seeds are scattered far from the parent plants. This happens in the case of castor and balsam. Figure A. The hairy fruit of sunflower, and B. Hairy seeds of mother oak. A. B. Figure xanthium. Keywords: asexual reproduction, budding, embryo, fertilization, fragmentation, gametes. Hypha, ovule, pollen grain, pollen tube, pollination, seed dispersal, sexual reproduction, spore, sporangium, vegetative propagation, zygote. What you have learnt? All organisms multiply or reproduce their own kind. In plants, there are two modes of reproduction, asexual and sexual. There are several methods of asexual reproduction such as fragmentation, budding, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. Sexual reproduction involves the fusion of male and female gametes. In vegetative propagation, new plants are produced from different vegetative parts such as leaves, stems, and roots. Flower is the reproductive part of a plant. A flower may be unisexual with either the male or the female reproductive parts. A bisexual flower has both the male and the female reproductive parts. The male gametes are found inside the pollen grains and female gametes are found in the ovule. Pollination is the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of the same or another flower. Pollination is of two types: self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. In cross-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same kind. Pollination takes place in plants with the help of wind, water, and insects. The fusion of male and female gametes is called fertilization. Fertilized egg is called zygote. Zygote develops into an embryo. Fruit is the mature ovary, whereas ovule develops into a seed which contains the developing embryo. Seed dispersal is added by wind, water and animals. Seed dispersal helps the plant to 1. Prevent overcrowding, 2. Avoid competition for sunlight, water and minerals, and 3. Invade new habitats. Exercises. Do this and comment this. Extended learning activities and projects. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do this and comment this.